right, Mara, thank you for coming on here for the Kroger Race for Riley presented by Prep-C virtual event. This is a continuation of some of the things that Dad have done for Riley here the past 20. I think this is the 24th year, so it's been around a long time. And
Wow.
yeah, appreciate you joining us. So I have some questions here. Some, like I said, you've heard. It's probably some you haven't, but I think I want to start off with one with Dad. Most didn't realize that he actually, he lived with you when he went to college for 4 years. He slept underneath Michael's bed, and they were kind of roommates for those 4 years. And then he packed up his stuff and went home whenever he was done. So, do you have any good stories from Dad's time that he was living with you, or things that he did, or things that you guys did together that was a lot of fun?
Well, you know what? To be honest with you, the time flew for sure, and he was almost invisible. John was always concerned about just being too intrusive and so on and so forth, and so he spent the time with Michael and Jeff because same age and all of that, and again, and me busy on the road as I was.
Yeah.
Was one of those things that after a while it would just it was a natural to have him there. So, sometimes you have many meaningful discussions, sometimes you don't. But I remember that every time I would come back from Europe or whatever I was, somewhere where I think I had a particular interest to him, I think he was always full of questions. Your dad, he always, he was very inquisitive, because he just wanted to know. Because I'm sure that he has his own objectives and his own goals. And he just wanted to know what that world was about, the world that I was living in. And even though they were part of it, but there was some of it that I think was maybe some degree might have been somewhat interesting, unusual, if you will. But again, John was always, I'm not saying this because he was your dad, but he was a good kid, good, very uncomplicated for us to have around. And again, we missed him terribly when they finally graduated and migrated to Indiana again. So, but it was good to have him again. As soon as we were over this, this thing, I'll probably think of a story. So I'll email it to you.
Yeah, we can recover it. We can cover it tomorrow on the broadcast.
Okay.
So yeah, it was interesting because Dad always talked about picking up the phone at the house, and he never knew who was calling. Sometimes it would be Paul Newman. I think he was there when you got the call to go back to Ferrari in '82, and that was like one of his last years there. So we always talked about you never knew who might be on the other end of that phone when you picked it up, because back then you didn't have caller ID and all the other stuff to know who was calling.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so then we spoke a couple weeks ago about Dad's Bathurst experience, and unfortunately you never got to go to the mountain, and I'm sure that you wished you did, and it's certainly not something on my bucket list. But we talked about some of the most daunting places, some of the places that you went, whether that's Nürburgring in a Formula One car or Terre Haute in a sprint car. And one of the things we left from that conversation is I was wondering, what's the one place that was like, when you walked out of there, you were just happy that you walked out of there. You had everything intact and you didn't have to go back there for 2, 3, 4 months or whatever it may be.
Well, there were a few of those.
More so back in your day.
Yeah, one was Pikes Peak for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I did it 3 times, and when finally wanted, I figured there's no way I'll ever come back here. As beautiful as it is, but I think he probably had some of those experiences himself, because of widespread his activities were. I mean, let's face it, he too experienced more than I ever thought. But from my standpoint, when I look back at situations like that, you just mentioned the Nürburgring. That was daunting because, I was so busy, even just my first time there was in '69 with a four-wheel drive Lotus, which is basically a takeoff from what the Indy car was. And, and again, uh, didn't have the luxury to go there, should have been there like a week ahead of time and taking a sports car and just run, run, and run. My first time around the Nürburgring, 14-mile track was with a race car. And no simulator time either. So everything was a bit of a surprise. You talk some of the guys that you got to know, and for instance, guys that were good there was like Jackie Eakes, for Jackie Stewart, but I developed a good relationship with Jackie Eakes even as early as then, and I asked him, there's one area, it's an uphill from Adenau to the Indianapolis corner, and it's called the Carousel.
Yep.
Carousel, not the Indianapolis. Indianapolis is in Lemont. From Adenau to the Carousel, and I mean, you coming up the hill, and all of a sudden it flattens out. Carousel is bank, but the bank is only wide enough for one car. And if you miss that, you're in flat, and the speed that you arrive, if you arrive just to catch the carousel. So I said, how do you align yourself? He says, when you go up the hill, you look at, there are two pine trees like this, you look at the peaks of the pine trees, align yourself up the pine trees. As soon as you come over the rise, you steer in. So next time you're at the Nürburgring, remember that, the pine trees.
I will. That's another bucket list. Hopefully
it was daunting. Yeah, but it was true though. It was true because throughout as you go, obviously more laps, and then that's what you do, and then you go there and sure. But again, the first time was actually frightening, that place, because you didn't want to miss the corners anywhere, because many places there was not even guardrail. You wind up in the woods at that point. Again, those experiences happened. The first time at Langhorne for me was daunting because it was the very first race with a Champ dirt car. And here again, this is probably one of the toughest dirt tracks, dirt miles anywhere. So I've had my moments, where I probably had a bit of a sleepless night before, which I needed to be well rested. But other than that, like I said, we worked through it pretty well. But there were some moments like that.
Yeah. Fortunately and unfortunately, some of those places are going away. Obviously, the safety aspect is nice when they get, but the Nürburgring is still pretty daunting, and they still run some GT cars there that are pretty cool, and it's definitely another place on the bucket list. There's like 3 or 4 of those places left. I think Nürburgring, Bathurst are kind of the 2 shining ones, and there's a couple other ones that are probably fall just underneath that.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, like I said, these are real classics that for some reason, finishing the Nürburgring, like the first time in the Ferrari in '71, finishing up there, I think it was really a great feeling. After I had won 2 races with Ferrari, but I felt much more of an accomplishment just by finishing. I think I finished 4th, but but I had a good fight there, and I felt, pretty good. I felt like the next time I could potentially win it, and but again, I'm just glad that I had the opportunity to race there.
That's awesome. So that kind of brings me to the next question. We've spoken about, there's some places that people would think that maybe it's more difficult to win at, or maybe there's some places that people would think it's easier to win at. Maybe it's not as big of a race, but for example, there's places that you have to be really good with your car. You have to be really good with strategy, in and out laps, all that stuff. And that makes it more rewarding. Is there a race that is particularly rewarding that you won because you kind of just nailed everything or maybe there's a time where you thought, man, this car is only good enough for 20th and we ran 3rd in it. And that's the maximum I could get.
I don't know if I could ever analyze a situation like that, but the one thing that I've thought many times for no reason at all, and even we're talking with Michael, um, uh, you win more races, several races at one particular track.
Yeah.
And then you say, is that your favorite track? Well, they're all favorite. I never really, I tried actually in my own mind not to say, well, this is my favorite. Oh no, we're going there now. Because if you're going there with with the negative attitude, I mean, you're beat before you leave home, actually. So I just kept an open mind always, but I could never really explain why, certain tracks, for some reason, things were going better than others. Now, coming back to say a rewarding win when everything just that started going wrong, but then by having done everybody doing the right thing, worked like the I think it was '86 when I won the Michigan 500. Um, I was on pole, and then a few laps into the race, we were running just a very new type of spark plugs that Bosch came up with, but they were not really had not tested enough for to run turbocharged engine and that type of blower pressure and whatever compression. And so anyway, a plug failed, and all of a sudden, I'm on 7 cylinder, and I come in the pits, and luckily, Daryl Sapi, my crew chief, just somehow he detected which one it was. It was a stroke of luck, and he pulled the plug, changed the plug, and I lost a lap and a half, and we continued, and I figured, man, we're done. And he kept telling me, no, we're not. We can still win this thing, and so forth. And sure enough, we were fast,
Yeah.
and a couple of yellows obviously always helps you. But then finally I unlapped myself, and then still had to go through the entire field, but we won that race. And that's again by doing everything right. I mean, at that point there was one disaster, but everything after that was just really at the maximum. So, something like that can be extremely rewarding, as you can imagine. But as you know, though, to win any race, especially races where you need some uh, service, several stops in the pits and so forth, where the tires feel, whatever, with that type of strategy, um, you know, everybody needs to do their job. I mean, especially I look at how competitive it is today, with the cars being so reliable and all that. It's no more a hope, that, okay, a couple of guys are going to drop out, I mean, the team has to be really right on. And the cliche about, you're only strong as your weakest link, I mean, it really, really applies today like never before. But again, I going through my entire career, I can always come up with a story. It seems like at one time or another, I experienced it all, and I'm grateful that I've had those opportunities because, again, I think having some negatives really, really makes you a better driver, a better, I think, all around person thinking, learning from the mistakes and realizing also how important every aspect of the team is. As that I think a lot of people don't realize how much of a team sport our sport is. How much you really, really depend on a team aspect to give you everything possible. You can be the greatest guy out there, and you come in and they lose your positions and so forth. You have no chance, and so again, it's it's you got to be able to know that or everybody got to know that they're so responsible for whatever their specialty is on the team.
Yeah, so that's what I think Michael's done such a great job at with his race team. Is, I mean, these guys are they're all looking at everything involved with guys that are doing the front end, to guys that are doing the driving the truck to the track, to the partnership activation. I mean, everything plays a vitally important role. And even if you aren't touching the race car, you're very important to whatever that's happening because you're providing the asset and the value. So I think it is a huge team sport. And, you want your mechanics to go that little extra mile, stay that extra 30 minutes and make sure that this is just right. And the truck driver make sure that wheel just a little extra polished so you show up and the competitors look at you, and it's a little bit of a mind game just like anything else. So I love that about Michael's team, and to be involved in something like that is it shows you what it takes to run it at a top level.
Yeah, no question. I talk about Michael's team. I think he has a wealth of information going around with all the engineers pretty much working together. They all can share the information. Pronto, while they're out there practicing or whatever. What your teammates are doing. The changes they're making, and it's incredible. I've never had that experience while I was driving. But again, that's a security blanket almost that you have as a driver, that you feel like you should never be lost, because one of the guys are going to be quickest. So, at least you can feed off of those kind of setups. So, it's to me, it's pretty darn good, that except that if I would be the quickest, I wouldn't want anybody else to know what I have. But,
That's right. Well, the thing too is it's not only the setups, but the driving. There's so much data. There's so much other things. You can see what guys are doing, the brake and the throttle, and there's really no more secrets anymore. And I think that's what makes the IndyCar series so great. You'll see the whole field. There'll barely be a spread, and it's all down to drivers.
It is, no question. But like I said, it's all about no mistakes, and that's the thing that. Like I said, it's pretty daunting. You got to be really right on to be at the top.
Yeah. So Dad we talk about one car, one track, all the other factors the same. And Dad always talked about if he could strap in, if he got to do if he could go back and drive one more car, one more point, he would go drive a Silver Crown car at the Springfield Mile. That was his most fun he ever had there. It rained the night before, so it was heavy. And he went out and was able to run qualifying wide open, and that was his moment. Like, this is really awesome. Is there a certain car, a certain time that was like, all right, this is really cool. This is kind of the one. Is there anything like that sticks out?
It's funny you would say Springfield Mile. I love that. That was my favorite. Mainly because of the way they would prepare it, like you said. And I remember. Your Uncle Aldo. Your grandfather, actually. It's not your uncle. I'm your uncle.
Yeah, you're my uncle.
Your grandfather in Springfield. Every time, and I make sure I get pushed off, one of the first guy, because the first lap, or first one or two laps, I could do flat. I just never lift going into one, just turn it in. And almost bicycle through it. We used to break the records by 2 to 3 seconds or 4 seconds sometimes, because it was just flat. And as soon as you set up, there's a groove, obviously, you're not going to do that anymore. So, but I remember Springfield is the only track that could ever do that.
Yeah. And
that always sticks in my mind, that, and I remember Aldo used to run over to the turn one, and watch it happen. And of course, it was up to me to do it regardless. Now I knew he was there, so I had to do it. I couldn't disappoint him. Yeah.
I went there in a Silver Crown car, and I said, this is the first time I'd been to a mile, and I asked my crew chief, I said, stand where they're lifting in one, so I can see where they're lifting, and just kind of stand by the fence and hold your hand up. So he was there the first lap. And the second lap, he went away. And I pulled in. I said, where'd you go? And he goes, well, they weren't lifting, so I figured I wouldn't stand by the fence. I said, okay, all right.
Did you know the story about your grandfather in Trenton for my first champ car race?
No. I remember, I vaguely heard it, but go ahead and tell it.
Well, just quickly, that obviously – didn't have a lot of time for practice or anything, but I had never been in a champ car at Trenton. And in fact, I only drove a sprint car, not a very good one there. But nevertheless, uh, I I just I watched where for the first 5 to 10 minutes or so of practice, I watched where the guys were backing off going into turn one. And I told Aldo, I said, now go on the back straightaway, go up before turn three. And there's a tree there. There was a tree there. I said, and sort of position yourself where the guys are backing off for turn three. And so anyway, then I go out and like the first flying lap, I'm looking for him. And he's way down deep, and obviously, and I spun. And, then, I didn't hit anything. So I get going again. I said, hey, Aldo, I said, I thought you were going to stand. He said, yeah. He says, I was watching where Floyd Brance or some of those guys were. Then I just went down another 50 feet to beat him. You have to lift a little bit later. So that was Aldo, always at my back.
He came to some sprint car races this weekend. He was having a lot of fun. Yeah.
Good. Yeah.
Wow. All right, so I'm gonna mix it up a little bit. We have so Dad talks about the lake, going up to the lake in the summers and all the good times up there, all the people that have been up there. Do you have a favorite lake memory or something that happened? I mean, he talks about the hydroplane boat and all that other good times that he had up there. Is there something that sticks out to you in your mind that happened up there?
Well, you mentioned the hydroplane boat. That's a good one, actually, because when I first got that thing, it's a pure racer. Actually, I won the world championships back in the mid 70s, and it's Alfa Romeo power and everything. I mean, it's just a pure front engine hydro, and but it's a little twitchy and so forth. And I was going out there, and I'm usually, I'm not fearless, but I and the thing was actually scaring me. And the first guy that actually went flat all the way around was your dad. And it was amazing. And then I said, well, you're hired. You're the driver. And then the second guy that went on there was Michael. And I think he turned in a little bit too deep at the end. He wound up in the rocks. He was okay. But so we had a couple of events like that. But I remember, your dad, he was perfect weight and everything, I think. And he's the one that managed. He taught us the way around, and he could do it flat all the way around, it's pretty daunting. I mean, that thing throws up a rooster tail almost up to the trees. I mean, it's really a fun machine. It's not a toy.
Do you still have it?
Oh yes, yeah. It's still there. You could be the next.
Yeah. I'll have to get up there this summer at some point. I know he actually had a deal put together. A lot of people don't know this. He was going to drive a hydroplane in the mid 90s, and the team actually, the sponsor got a hold of the sponsor of the hydroplane was a sponsor of the Cup car, and the team owner of the Cup car got wind of it and ended up putting he nixed that idea.
Yeah, but I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised that he would venture into that. But I tell you what, he honestly, he was a natural in this thing.
Yeah.
And again, this is a pure racer, and he just took on it like, duck to water.
Maybe that's what he should have done. Maybe he should have been a boat racer then.
He should have done that.
Yeah.
He would have been good at it, no question. Yeah. But you saw he adapted to all the different disciplines that he's been in. I mean, I'm learning even more from you, with what you're writing, about his career and so forth. And you're actually bringing about some of the things that I knew that I had forgotten, but only because, your dad just mixed it up just about everywhere, and then, and very well. I mean, he made his mark pretty much everywhere. So again, he knew how to adapt like no one that I've ever known. I remember that, just driving together with the highlights, that when I look back as we are racers, when we were teammates at Le Mans, for instance, for
Yeah.
Porsche, in 1988. That was a real highlight just to have him on there. It just felt so comfortable. And again, we were not lucky. We lost a cylinder about 1 in the morning. I think the way the strategy was going, we'd have won that race.
Yeah.
We finished fifth or sixth, I think. But on 5 cylinders, what helped us a little bit was that we had a couple hours of wet. But again, he had never been in Le Mans. He was right there with the times and everything. So again, just talent was there, but the way he could adapt the situation was very, very impressive, and that's why he was so successful with different types of cars.
Yeah, I think you can look at that throughout his career and see, like, he won the 24 hours Daytona his first year. You know what I mean? And that's a prototype, and so he was able to, just get in and get going, and he was able to do all these extra things and all these different things, and I tell people he's very underrated for that, because the people have a hard time understanding how hard it is. And I kind of equate it to whenever, like, Michael Jordan went to play baseball. You're an athlete, you're a world-class athlete in one sport, but your body needs to get totally adjusted to the new cars, to the new thing, totally different driving style, and for him to switch back and forth. And you did the same thing. Is very, you guys made it look so easy that people take it for granted, I feel like, at times.
Well, I think a lot of it is because of the love that you have for what you're doing. He was the same. If something wasn't going right, he didn't have the opportunity. He won discipline. He was not going to put his chin in his socks, and say, okay, I'm unlucky. You just go. You just get something out, do something else. And then it's just, I think, it's your attitude. It's can-do attitude that makes all the difference. I mean, none of us are born with a steering wheel in our hands or anything, but it's just the desire and the love for what you're doing. And that's what I always say. The burning desire is what drove me always, today, for that matter. And because of that, you just adapt. You just do it. And again, I don't know how to explain it, to be honest with you. But it's either there or it's not. It's all about desire and love for what you're doing, period.
Yeah, when I listened to your Beyond the Grid here a couple of weeks ago, and it was about, you made a comment that you always drove because you never know when it could be taken away from you. And that might have been not getting the next opportunity, or possibly worse, getting hurt or getting killed at your time. So I think that when you have that mentality when you drive, you're always on the limit, you're always maximizing, and you got the ultimate focus, because it could be your last.
Well, to some degree, yes, but it's I didn't really ever try to dwell on that negative per se. All I wanted to do is derive the satisfaction that the sport can give you. The sport can be cruel, but it can also be very rewarding, as you know. So I was going for that reward, and to be honest with you, Aldo and I were very lucky. As we started out, we won our first race. We didn't know why, but the feeling though.
Yeah.
After that, we crashed a few times because you thought, well, if I won the first one, we should win them all. But the point I'm making is the incredible feeling that you derive from winning any race is something that keeps driving you, keeps you motivated. Now, I want to experience that again. When I had. Give you, for instance, Indianapolis. After my rookie year, I didn't finish rookie year 65. I didn't finish 66, 67, 68. And I was very competitive. I was on pole a couple of times since 65, and then 69. I had all those problems, and then I go win it, and the feeling what I felt when I crossed that finish line, I said, I wish every racing driver could feel this, because it's just so unbelievable. I said, nobody can ever take this away from me, type of thing, and So that's what drives you. You know, that's what drives you. And many times I fault myself for not being so patient because sometimes more than once I threw it away at the start, and I always keep saying, you know what, you can't win a race on the first lap, but you can lose it. Well, I did a few times, you know, even though I had the wisdom to think that way. But, you know, once you get in it, you think a little bit differently sometimes. And, but nevertheless, you know, that uh, the drive that I had to try to win at all costs, I think really worked for me.
It's funny you mentioned that because when I started racing, Dad was, you know, there was a time when it was like, you know, what happened there? And I said, well, you know, I didn't think I'd have any tire left at the end, so I kind of conserved. And he goes, and we don't conserve. He goes, you go out there and you lead every lap, and if you blow the tire or you don't have enough tires left, and that's just the way it is. He goes, but if you drop out, you want to be leading and lead as many laps as possible. He goes, that's the Andretti way. And I thought, okay, that's stuck with me. And
It's
so
great philosophy.
that's the way he goes, it's better to drop out leading than to conserve and run second or third or whatever it may be. And so I think that was kind of the way he lived his life. He looked at it, even, you know, with the cancer and everything, like it was like, I'm going in to win this thing. There's no, it's black and white to me. I'm going to do everything I can to win this race.
You know what? You're so right. That was refreshing about John. He, you know, different occasions that I had, you know, talking with him. I mean, his thoughts were in the right place. And it was always about, you know, having the solution to things. Um, and looking at the bright side of things also, you know, just to be positive. And, and, and again, like I said, you could tell how much he loved the sport, you know, how much, you know, he lived for it in so many ways. And the other part is I remember, you know, in the last couple of years when, you know, I would call, you know, we would talk. And, you know, I would ask, you know, how you doing? He said, you know, I said, ask Nancy, you know, I said, I'm okay. Ask, she's worrying about that. And then we talk about an hour and a half. All we talk about solving the racing problems of the world, you know, whether it was IndyCar, NASCAR, Formula One. I mean, he was all in on all of them. And I just love the way he used to break things down and reason things out in a certain area. But you know what? He was right on. I mean, he really got it.
Yeah.
He really got it. Like I said, this was so perfect, you know, that I always came away with something enlightening, you know, something good about what he always had to say. That was his dimension. That was his dimension because, you know, throughout he experienced it all really, but he was all in, and very interested, totally analyzing because he needed to know. You know, like if he would say something to you, you know, he felt that, you know, I'm just going to try to say something that means something, not just talk. You know,
Yeah.
and that's where I think he was. Had to be so valuable for you along the way.
Yeah, he was. I mean, there was no, and the thing about him was, and he was very much like you, which it kind of leads to my next question is like, you know, if you hadn't been a racer, what do you think you would have done? I mean, Dad comes up with, he always said, I would have been an investment banker, but I would have run sprint cars on the weekend to make a little extra money and to keep racing. So he was like, I would have done a little bit of both. And that's what he liked to do. But, you know, you can weld. A lot of people don't know that. You fabricate, machine, you know, you worked on your own cars, you built your own cars, all that, you know, all that. I'd let you weld on my race car and I would go run it. So what do you think you would have done?
Would not have been a mechanic, I can tell you that. No, I always say I never had a plan B, but the other thing, I would have pursued a career of a fighter pilot. I think
That makes sense.
that's the thing that early on, not that I ever said, okay, if this doesn't work, that's what I'm going to do. But along the way, you know, I've been asked that question forever, you know, and that I always go back to that because I think that's almost the closest thing to really giving the sensation, the feel of mastering something that can actually hurt you and just to be in control of it. And something that will go to, limits that very few people can deal with. And that's the challenge, really, that you'd love to deal with, to have experience with, and also, and not only that, to be able to dominate that part, to have the control of it. I know that I had some experience with. I was invited to a Wing Commanders conference, back in the middle '80s. All of F-16 fighter pilots, and it was talking with them was just like talking to a bunch of racers. There was just something. There was so many things that correlated, with the art lingo. So that's why I say that. I think, but I'm quite happy that I didn't have to pursue that, because I'm quite happy that everything that happened with the race car. But I equate that in some ways. So my welding abilities and everything would have been totally wasted.
Well, unless you had to repair, the flight or the plane on deck or something like that.
Unless I had to weld a wing back on.
Yeah, exactly. It's funny because I saw a fighter pilot probably about 2 months ago. They came by the shop and I was talking to him, and their mindset is very similar to ours, or similar to a racing driver's. It's like talking to a racing driver, but even the stakes are even higher because the people on the other side, they want to cause. They not only want to. You're driving something that can cause serious harm, or you're flying something that causes serious harm, but the others want to equally inflict that harm upon you. So it's very interesting.
Yeah, interesting indeed. Yeah, like I said, that's every time I talk to one of those individuals, I just feel that we're speaking the same language. Yeah, for sure.
So this past weekend was Father's Day, and I raced at Kokomo on Sunday, and I know Dad would have. He would have been right there with me. He loved going to Kokomo. He loved going to sprint car racing. And, I have some fond memories of going to your parents' house, Nona Rena, Nona Gigi's house. And I still remember going there, visiting with my parents when I was really young. So you have a favorite story about your father that you'd like to share? I know it's a pretty well documented history about how much he disliked racing, but I know there's Dad's always told a couple funny ones, and I'm sure you have some as well.
Well, my dad was an interesting individual. We, as kids, for some reason or other, we didn't have a dad we could talk to about racing or anything like that, so that part was out the window. But he loved the cars, and later on in his life is when he started started experiencing the great American cars and all that, and so that's pretty much what we what I had the pleasure of to be able to share with him. But there's other things about my dad that was quite interesting, as far as how ingenious he was I think in a very simple way, how he could just concoct things, like he had a little shop in the back of his the house, and I mean, even and he used to do like physical training back there, and he built himself this thing, like he had the handle bar of a bicycle, and on the rope, and then he's lifting a cement block thing in the back, and like I said, doing sort of things. And then he would go up and to trim trees. He was well into his 80s. He would go climb up on the tree and trim trees, with doing all that. One time he also fell off the tree and all that. He was an interesting guy in that respect, because the one thing that I used to get a kick out of, age did not interfere with what he wanted to do for some reason. We were up at the lake one time, and he fell off a ladder, and I said, "But Dad, I wouldn't even go up there the way he had it." You know what I mean? So if he had to do something, he just would go about it and do it. Uh, like I said, in his own way, it was someone that actually he had a lot of wisdom. I think if you took the time to really see the way he liked to do things, he was always very correct in that sense, by doing things. Very proud man as well. There were a lot of things that he taught me without even saying anything, without just me being observant. So, yeah, I mean, that was a cool guy. I remember it was one time, I got to tell you the story. He didn't drive very fast, and when he was coming more of age, he was losing some of his friends that he would go to the hospital and see them. They were on respirators or something, and then he said to my mom, he says, if I ever get to that point, that I'm so sick that I would have to go to a hospital and stuff. He says, you and I said we get on that Bronco, and I'll just go over and I'll hit a tree, and we finish it like that. And she says, Gigi, you don't drive fast enough to kill us. All you're going to do is create more problems for the kids because, on top of everything else, we're going to have some broken bones.
That's funny. She was the gasser. She was the one.
The gasser. Yeah. My mom, I remember one time that she blew a stop sign right about a half a block away from the house, and one of our local gendarmes were just sitting there. He pulled her over, and she said, "What?" He says, "Madam, you didn't stop for the stop sign." She said, "What do you want me to do? Have lunch there?" The chief of police says, he was one of the new recruits. She said she told him how to cow is the cabbage. He didn't know what to say. So she was not intimidated. Now, if it was my dad, I think he would. It would have been another story but my mom, she was something else. But anyway, interesting.
I tell this. There's a story too. I think you told it before. You were driving the I think it was the Gapco sprint car at Salem for the Pat O'Connor and the James Memorial race, and you ran that was one of the first races your dad came to, right? And you're running the sprint car, and you ran 8th, which was one of your first national sprint car starts, and you thought, oh, that's pretty good, and you came in and got out, and he said, well, if you're just going to run 8th, you need to figure out something else to do.
I know. It was, the other one too was actually the first race that he ever attended was Trenton, 1964. When I was driving for Doug Sturley, the very first champ car race that I was in. This is the one where Aldo was trying to kill me. But anyway, and I went on, and Lord and behold, I finished 11th. To me, that was pretty darn good. I was really happy with that. And that's the one my dad says, well, okay, but, I thought maybe you could win it, I was, so anyway.
Didn't cut you any slack there.
He had high expectations. maybe you better pick up a different person.
That's funny. So, well, one question I never got to ask you this is, so I think it was Laguna in '91. Dad talks about some stories about you guys rode motorcycles, quite frequently when he was there and going to college. And you got on a motorcycle and were quick enough to qualify for the Grand Prix right before IndyCar qualifying, if my memory serves me correct. And you ever wanted to go motorcycle racing? Ever thought about doing it?
Well, motorcycle racing was part of Aldo and I's plans when we were just kids still in Italy, because as much as you know, our dream was to become auto race drivers, that looked so far away. So we thought, well, our Uncle Priest could at least buy us a little motorcycle so we could start racing motorcycles. And you know, bikes always interested me. You know, GP bikes throughout, and got to know, you know, obviously some of the top guys, as you could imagine. One guy that I really associated was like Kenny, you know, Kenny Roberts and so forth. And in fact, when he was in Europe, he won the world championship when I won the championship as well in '78. And a couple of the tests we were together and so forth. And I, when we won the championship, we were at the test track in Liège in Belgium. And then he drove my car, my Formula One car, and I drove his racer, you know, and I think I did better with his racer than I did with my racer. He was, but anyway, and I loved, and then you're talking about Laguna, and I always had a bike. I still do, you know, I've always had one of these great sport bikes, you know, in my garage, and love it. Laguna, there was a little demonstration with one of the GP bikes, and Kenny Roberts at the time, he was the team manager for Honda, and so and I asked him, I said, hey, I said, you know, I like, but he wasn't there actually. He was in Spain, you know, that's where the team was based, and I asked one of the guys, man, I'd like to take a, you know, couple of laps with that. And so they called him and they said, yeah, for sure, you know, and no leathers or nothing, you know, and the only thing that was a problem is, you know, even the helmet, I had the shield, you know, when you bend down, I couldn't see. But anyway, I did like 4 laps and I loved that thing, you know. And anyway, like I said, I think still went fast enough. I think I would have qualified 18th, you know, the year, you know, I think there was, this was the second year that we're going to have the race. But the year before, you know, I would have qualified like 18th in there. So I felt pretty good about it, even though, you know, with that bike would have been on pole, but nevertheless.
Yeah. That's
yeah, I love that.
Yeah. Dad said it was
motorcycle racing. I think one of the most entertaining motorsports events, period. The most entertaining hour of motorsports, because those races are relatively short, but it's really phenomenal. I love those guys.
Those guys are a different breed, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think your dad felt the same thing. He liked the bikes, you know.
He said, I've always said, hey, Dad, I want a bike. You know, I want to try to get a bike. And he said, you know what, Jarett? He said, you can get a bike. You just have to wait until Mom's gone. He goes, I don't care if you get a bike and I'm here, but until Mom is, you have to promise me not to get a bike. And I said, all right, I can promise you that, Dad. I'll do that for you. Okay. So, and he goes, I'm hoping that she's around forever so you never end up getting a bike. And I said, okay, well, you know.
I think that was probably good thinking on your behalf. Yeah. They're pretty dangerous on the road.
Yeah. He didn't ask me to do many things. He didn't ask a ton from me. So when he did, you know, you always did it, right? So.
Yeah, well. Do what you got to do.
I got one more question for you. This one comes from Olivia. So she goes, what Olympic sport do you think you'd be best at?
If they had basketball.
Be a point guard?
Point guard. Triathlon.
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah.
Tennis.
Snow skiing, maybe.
I don't know if they have tennis. Yeah, tennis is. I mean, water skiing. You name it. I think I'd be good at it.
Oh, okay. Well, I got through all my questions, and this was great. I really appreciate you doing this and coming out, and I hope you got a couple questions that maybe you haven't gotten before, as many as you've gotten over the years. But a lot of these are. This is really insightful. It's good to. It's always good to talk to you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me. All the questions, I never heard any of those before, so you were original for sure.
Well, I can thank my you can thank the girls for that. I'm not that hard of a thinker, so they're much smarter. So I appreciate it. And everybody from Race Riley really appreciates and is going to enjoy this.
Okay. Cheers.
Good. Thank you, Mario.
Love you, man.
Love you too.